I know I'd probably
Peter,
yeah.
I would push back a little bit on you. China has not taken the technical lead worldwide.
I'll give you a link to an article I read today.
Well,
on 36 areas, they've taken the lead.
Send me the link.
I'll send it through to you in a few minutes.
Yeah, send me the link. I'd like to read it, but I regard technology as widely dispersed around the world today. The United States continues to lead. It's making new investments. EU continues to lead. Ukraine has great uh, assets in developing technology. And I would also point to Taiwan and South Korea, great technological leaders. I just cannot believe that that China is the world's leading technology developer. I just can't believe it. Maybe
I'll pop it to you. I'm no expert, but I'll pop it through to you to have a look at. Okay.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nick.
Have we had the DOJ announcement from today regarding US citizens and Russian intelligence officers charged with conspiring to use US citizens as illegal agents of the Russian government? I wasn't on the space earlier today, and I don't know whether this came out.
We spoke about it, but why don't you go through it? No, it's a very interesting topic also for our US audience.
Okay, so so US citizens and Russian intelligence officers charged with conspiring to use US citizens as illegal agents of the Russian government. Defendants sought to sow discord, this American headline writing style of using a comma when and there is spread pro-Russia propaganda and interfere in elections within the United States. A federal grand jury charging 4 US citizens and 3 Russian nationals with working on behalf of the Russian government and in conjunction with the FSB to conduct a multi-year foreign malign influence campaign in the United States. Among other conduct, alleges that the Russian defendants recruited, funded, and directed US political groups to act as unregistered illegal agents of the Russian government. Boom, 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 boom. Allegedly weaponized. I love the way the prosecutorial system. Once we've been through the grand jury, they just have to include the word allegedly, but otherwise everyone's kind of doing the perp walk, aren't they? It's, but everyone's innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. But nonetheless, we're going to make these fairly dramatic statements. FSB. So the indictment basically says that the FSB is interfering in American elections. 3 of the Russians conspired to directly and substantially influence elections by clandestinely funding and directing the political campaign of a political candidate for local office in St. Petersburg, Florida, in 2019. You wonder if they just got the wrong St. Petersburg, don't you? A Sims 3 moment. Yeah, it's quite as part of the campaign, Ionov, one of the defendants, allegedly recruited members of political groups, including the African People's Socialist Party, and a political group in California referred only as Political Group 3, to participate in the influence campaign. One focus of the operation was to create the appearance of American popular support for Russia's annexation of territories in Ukraine. The APSP repeatedly hosted Ionov via video conference, discussed the war, during which he falsely stated that anyone who supported Ukraine also supported Nazism and white supremacy. So it looks like some black activists were made into useful idiots.
But Nick, it was hysterical. St. Petersburg, Florida. Out of the 4 people, 3 of them all are stationed St. Petersburg, and then I think the second state is Missouri. It was crazy. But that was the hysterical part. Like, are they such fucking dolts Sorry, my language. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I must say, if I was going to attempt to undermine democracy in the United States, St. Petersburg, Florida might not be where I would start.
No.
But
Nick,
you wonder if it
no,
isn't literally a
no,
case that they thought it was Leningrad.
No, you have to. This is not a joking matter. This has to do with the fact who is based in St. Petersburg, Florida. You have to go through the companies which are based there. Then you find out why the data research centers spin off these kind of issues.
I
There's
have
a
no
reason
idea,
for
Axel.
it.
Please tell us who's based in St. Petersburg, Florida.
So Axel, do you know that why they go to that other destination? The three of them as well. It sounds like you know.
There's a lot of support services which have been used in the past decades for the development of research, quantitative research based in Florida, and a lot of quantitative research which has gone into US defense technology and in support of the US Navy. A lot of that is all around that wonderful belt from Biloxi all the way around the Gulf down to Florida. And St. Petersburg is just yet another center where a lot of people who have good living standards, it's a nice area to be in, and they have managed to gain a lot of people who are in that data research setup. And there's a number of very, very good people there. And yeah, that's just what it is. And amongst those, you always find a few very, very bad ones.
Do we know?
Increase the frequency of outsourcing and the intensity of outsourcing, and then be profligate with, say, security clearances, and you end up with this.
Do we know anything about any of the 4 United States citizens? Let's have a look.
It has not been published.
Okay. 3 of them are US citizens residing in both St. Petersburg and St. Louis, Missouri. And one of them is residing in St. Petersburg, Florida and Atlanta. And he was they're all, so basically they are the dupes from the African People's Socialist Party. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an interesting story, especially in this week of leaks from the United States. What we are able to see is Russian action inside the United States to influence elections and to use social media to sow disinformation, and with that disinformation, division, and in this case, to actually try to control a local candidate. I don't know what level that local candidate is at. I actually assumed it was a candidate for the House of Representatives, but maybe it's a candidate for school board. I don't know.
Dog catcher. I should have said that I brought this up because our good friend David Farrell tweeted it into my timeline. So apologies for not giving David credit for that. When I read it, I was kind of hoping it would be like, the Trump administration or something. I think there are probably going to be, given the level of this, I think there are going to be many, many more. I imagine that they are working hard on finding things to charge Donbass Davuchka with. And I think if they've tested the water a few times, I suspect they might have quite a backlog of these. Because I suspect the Russians didn't just stop at school board of St. Petersburg, Florida.
This probably doesn't have anything to do with Donbass Davuchka or Didi, as think of her. This is a quite separate issue, and it is an investigation that's been going on for quite some time. The feds will have no problem, Nick, finding things to charge Didi with. And she's already in deep SHITE.
Alan, let's imagine that, and I'm sure this isn't true, but let's imagine that the FBI knew nothing more about DD than we did, let's say a week ago. And let's imagine that they've been working hard and they've already identified some stuff they can charge her with. What would the timeline look like in terms of, I don't know, what do you do? Do you go for a preliminary hearing and then you convene a grand jury and then you have a sealed verdict from the grand jury and then your indictment and then something else happens? Let's say that they've got stuff, they've got evidence. What is the kind of realistic minimum time, assuming that they go at the normal pace, before we will see her doing her perp walk?
All the FBI needs is agreement of a judge to arrest her. That the FBI has reasonable suspicion, and that and they can arrest her. They just need the agreement of one judge, Nick.
But what we've seen so far has been more about grand juries, which I imagine is a more kind of slow and steady, but perhaps more secure way. If they go the grand jury route, is that like a week, a month?
My God, grand juries can take forever, and trust me, there's not going to be a grand jury for Didi.
Okay.
They don't need a grand jury. I mean, you saw how quickly they took Teixeira into custody in Massachusetts. They didn't go through a grand jury. They just need one judge saying, let me approve your arrest warrant. You have the evidence. Let me look at it. Okay, go get him.
And on the DD case, in the case of Teixeira, I mean, he was serving military. How much more difficult do you think it will be to find something to charge her with that they could be confident it will stick, given that she is apparently now a civilian? And as far as I know, she hasn't. I mean, Teixeira leaked secrets while on active duty. This woman is a civilian, and as far as I know, at least I haven't read everything. Most of what she's done is go and be pro-Russian and dumb on social media, but those would appear to be First Amendment protected. So I'm wondering what they're likely to come up with.
Nick, they're not protected by the First Amendment. You're saying that her leaks or her tweets are free speech. Let me tell you, if I had a secret document in my possession tonight and I tweeted it out, I would be talking to the FBI before my shift is up.
But has she? I didn't know she'd been revealing secret documents. I thought she had merely been expressing pro-Russian points of view.
Both.
Okay, so she has taken some secret documents home and been leaking those.
Her server, her account, which she now says, and that's why she said it, by the way. That's why she gave the interview. I said this here on this space 2 days ago. The interview with the Wall Street Journal, she used the abuse for the purpose of trying to exculpate herself by saying that 15 or 16 different people were jointly responsible for the account. Mm-hmm. Because her account and the group supporting the account had released information.
I didn't know that.
Point in time. Yeah.
Okay, I thought she'd just been producing propaganda.
And this information she released was doctored, meaning photoshopped.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the thing. So the stuff which you and we all here discussed, which evidently had been manipulated, appeared on Telegram because they had released it from their own Telegram channel over there.
Yep.
Together with 2 other channels which are affiliated or collaborating with them. Those 3 channels distributed across Telegram, which then snowballed and then came back and fled back and to say meandered back into Western Twitter, as always. This is how information operations work, as you know.
Okay, I hadn't realized that she had actually been involved with documents. I thought she was just a sort of extremely active pro-Russian propagandist.
We have to be very careful. Her account. It is her account. And
she
created it. And she's responsible for it, but she now claims that 15 or 16 or how umpteen people are in charge.
Yes, right. The WSJ, the Wall Street Journal reporter said she claimed she declined to name any of them. They all apparently go to a different school. Okay, thanks for the clarification. Prince.
Yeah, evidently when we got into that conversation last night, Axel, some of those 15 to 16 other people were in that room that Intel and OPSEC were talking about last night. But actually, what I came up to say is, if you look at when she was separated from the military, which I believe was in November of last year, so November of 2022, the Telegram channel started before that. So those activities started while she was still in the military. And I believe that there are some charges that she could be facing, having had a
100%.
Yep, having had a clearance with the military. Yeah, having had a clearance with the military while doing those kinds of activities on Telegram that were pro-Russian. She is in deep doo-doo.
Yeah, she's taken an oath and she's broken it.
Can the Secret Service arrest her so that it can be SSDD?
No, Nick, I'm sorry. The Secret Service cannot arrest her, but if they could, you would have your little acronym there. So, Chalmer, go ahead, please.
Yes. So as to this odd person who has that Russian account, I can't even pronounce her account name. They're also investigating her for embezzlement and for providing monetary support to Russia, to the Russian military. So honestly, that's probably more likely what she's going to go to jail for. It's it'll be a little bit more cut and dry on that. As to the China piece, I posted up, I guess, in the chat here, the report that the guy was referencing earlier about the Wall Street Journal article that referenced a report by Australian. Hang on a second, and I'll get it here. It's an Australian think tank, and they say that 37 out of 40 something technology sectors that China leads in now, not the U.S. I don't know that that's completely true. I think it's a little dubious. They reference it off of the number of high value papers and publications that are being put out. I think that's a little arbitrary on that side. So I don't know if that's completely true. The Chinese are really good at stealing stuff. They're not really good at coming up with their own stuff. And it's the Australia Alliance is what it's called. Australian Strategic Policy Institute. That's it.
My other job is investigating scientific fraud, and it's at times embarrassing the amount of fraud that we point out coming from China. You start to look kind of racist after a while. A couple of years ago, one of my co-investigators discovered that basically their Chinese equivalent of the head of the National Science Foundation had dozens of fabricated or manipulated papers. So Chinese science, obviously, they're doing some good stuff, but Chinese fake science is done by the bucket load. You need to know, for example, that if a Chinese researcher can get a paper into Nature or Science or Cell, which are the kind of the three top journals in science, the lead author will receive a cash, or the principal investigator anyway, will receive a cash bonus of about 45,000 US, which is about 3.5 years' salary for a researcher in China. So there are massive financial incentives for them to cheat. Now, there are fairly substantial incentives for scientists to cheat everywhere. And if I may shamelessly plug myself for a moment, I was interviewed by BBC Radio about this, and the program will be going out in a couple of weeks. But the scale of scientific fraud in China is quite amazing. And so if the basis on which they are doing this is number of papers being published in scientific journals, then it is at best worthless. At best worthless. The other problem is that the scientific publishing system itself is utterly, utterly corrupt. Not in a sort of China, Russia, any other kind of a way, but purely in a rentier, in a capitalism gone wrong kind of a way. So the scientific measuring a country's output by scientific publications 10 or 15 years ago might have flown. These days, anybody who knows anything about it will be pointing and guffawing. So if that's the basis of this article, which I haven't read, somebody sent it to me, I haven't had time to read it yet. If that is the basis of the claim, then it is beyond worthless.
Yeah, from what I and I just skimmed over it. I'll admit I did not read in depth. It's that's the basis of the claim.
Or colleagues of mine recently discovered a phenomenon called the paper mill, which is a company to whom you can pay $500 or $600, and they will write a scientific paper to order, particularly in the biomedical field. You pick an illness, you pick a gene, and you combine the two, and they will write a paper about the influence of that gene on that illness, perhaps interacting with some medication. No experiments ever took place. It gets sent off to perfectly normal peer-reviewed journals. The paper mill themselves will then arrange for fake reviewers, and your article will get published, and you will score a publication. And absolutely no science took place whatsoever, but you score a point on measures of your nation's or your university's or your personal productivity. It's quite shocking. It's kind of like discovering that the Russians have been paying off your politicians all these years.
Are you saying the Chinese emperor has no clothes?
Listen, there's plenty of great science being done in China, but the percentage and the sheer volume of fakery that's going on, and the relative lack of willingness to address it is it's hampering what they're doing. I suppose in a good way for us.
Because
let
we
us
don't
not
attack
get
them.
We don't
want to attack them. That's all. We
let
don't
us
want
not
to attack them and call them out.
It's kind of difficult because the extent to which it's coordinated isn't clear. But let us also not get too complacent, because the amount of fake Western science is quite astonishing too. So let's not, unfortunately.
I sent you this article, Nick, which is why I sent you this article about industrial production and manufacturing, because if science turns into proper engineering and
that's the thing, isn't it? Yeah,
that's the test of it. And
that is indeed the test. But
they're still not able to produce a jet aircraft engine for their stealth fighters that will make it stealthy enough. They have not managed to make it past about the 1970s in their jet fighter technology because they can't get the metallurgy down.
Yeah.
I'll be more interested in accepting that they have made a move when they start actually able to do something with it.
Axel makes a great point. The proof of one has to do basic science, but at some level of application of basic science, at some level you have to come out and say, I can make a transistor that is twice as fast and uses half as much energy, and at that point someone will say, great, please put one into my phone. And that's where we find that out. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do basic science, and it also doesn't mean that we shouldn't do science that can't be applied. But it means that if science can't be falsified, and a great deal of published science is just busy work for graduate students, which occasionally, and then a lot of it done for clicks. A lot of times you read a study and you think, okay, what did they write first? Did they write the hypotheses? Did they run the participants, or was the first thing they wrote the press release? And then they did the experiment to meet the press release. And quite a lot of the time you read an article and you think, okay, they knew in advance what great story this would make, and they did it to order. So I call it science by the yard. It's very depressing. But China, the one saving grace is that China is doing this kind of crap even worse, even more than the West is.
You know, Nick, I think I'll use a chat bot tonight to write a scientific paper, maybe on a childhood disease like whooping cough or something like that, something I'm familiar with.
I read that ChatGPT passed the state bar exam. It's getting quite impressive. An alert reader suggested that it should be DD is in deep doo doo. That sounds like a song by the Police, doesn't it?
It's more like a doo-wop song from the 50s, Nick.
I wonder if we could use one of those to write some notes for us to use while we're co-hosting.
I only use my memory.
The difficulty with ChatGPT is that its training data stopped in June of 2021, so it's not very good on current affairs. But it is extremely good at writing undergraduate essays. In fact, the giveaway for me with a ChatGPT written undergraduate essay is it contains no spelling or grammar errors, and it's perfectly punctuated and spaced.
Isn't it funny that essentially ChatGPT now makes by this clarity and showcasing what can be fudged, makes a great argument for the original system of British universities or English universities at that point in time, where there's a mentor and a small group, and the tutor, mentor, whatever you call it, actually supervises what you do and discusses it with you, and you have to present your original idea. I think
indeed, I'm a product of that system, and it certainly argues for the return of the brief viva. When sort of you hand in your assignments, class of 20, and you know that 3 students will be chosen at random to take a brief 6-question viva on what they wrote, and to see if they understood it. And I think the prospect of that might deter some of them from just having. I mean, we've always had other people write there. We've always had people writing essays for their friends. It's just that this way you don't even have to buy them a beer. And I think and the productivity is higher with ChatGPT. But I think we're going to have to start, teaching people properly and examining them properly.
Which is what we once did. And critical thinking was the basics for advancement. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Well, yep. No, absolutely. No, it's the question is, will we learn that lesson? And I rather suspect we won't, because we're fat and lazy.
I will never use ChatGPT unless I know what its stand on the Oxford comma is. If it's incorrect, I'll never use it. Carrie,
what is the incorrect stance, Alan?
The incorrect stance is to use it incorrectly, Nick. Or in other words, to omit it.
Oh, okay, you are pro Oxford comma.
I'm very pro Oxford comma.
I'm glad, because otherwise my finger was poised over the co-host pod ejector seat button for you.
May I highlight that this is completely inconsistent with good old English literature and, by the way, scientific reasoning. There's a reason for the differentiation, and Lynn Truss nearly won a big prize for her book because of that. Eats, shoots, and leaves.
Yeah, well, I'm with the person who pointed out. What was it? We invited the strippers, JFK and Stalin. I am 100% Oxford comma, and not just because I'm usually writing to APA style, which mandates it. But
Axel, the full title of that book, which is about pandas, eats, shoots, and leaves.
I said that.
I think that's what he said.
Shoots and leaves. That's exactly what I said. Yeah. And it, by the way, makes an argument for the differentiation.
I learned that phrase roughly about the time I learned the phrase of a story about the former Labour leader in the UK who was put in charge of a of a defense committee, and the headline was "Foot, Heads, Arms, Body."
Carrie, save us from the Oxford comma.
Good evening, you pedantic old farts. How are you all?
We're pedantic and smelly.
Pedantic, smelly old farts.
That underscore escalated underscore quickly .gif.
I don't.
It seems that Kerry has easily been able to calculate quite easily that the average age of the speaker panel currently is slightly elevated.
I have very limited things to say today because I have to admit to being disloyal to MriyaReport. There are other things going on in my life, such as listening to music, and I've been listening to quite a lot of new stuff today. But I do have one comment to make, actually. I've been inspired by Medvedev. So I'm going to nuke the child that put their hands in their pockets as they said good morning to me today. I'm incredibly dissatisfied with this child who was so disrespectful that they had their hands in their pockets as they walked into my classroom. So I'm just going to nuke them. That's obviously the thing to do. You know, any minor slight, you've just got to nuke them. That's my mood of the day. Thought it's worth sharing that.
And then you go into recess and have an absolute,
yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely have an absolute. So yes, I shall leave you to I shall listen to you as you carry on taking apart the use of the comma, great fun, and the apostrophe. And Axel, quite disappointed, can't hear any steak frying at the moment. So I think your red meat quota might be down for the day.
You arrived a little bit belatedly, I have to say. About 4 hours ago, I did stay.
So when we go to Crimea Beach Party, are you going to be doing posh barbecue for us?
As Daryl and I agreed, we will have a little look-see as to what we can fit on the various large, say,
definitely charcoal.
tailgating barbecue tables.
Definitely real.
We will
charcoal.
have both gas. We'll have gas. We'll have charcoal, and we have a couple of beefers as well, because we want to do some steaks really properly.
Okay, not sounding too bad. You have me worried then for a minute.
We will poison you all quickly and gallantly.
Right. I shall sit back to listener. If I hear anything that makes me want to take the mickey out of you all, I'll come back up again. See you later, guys. I'll be listening in and waiting for my moments to tease you.
Thank you, Carrie. As Methuselahs all here, we are easily teased, very, very easily. So Nick and Axel, we were talking a little bit about Macron and Lula and this peace plan. I use the word plan loosely. Lavrov is in Brazil meeting with Lula, and I don't think they've had a press conference today. I suppose they might have one tomorrow. And I have no idea what they'll suggest. And it's a curious combination of nations to pursue peace. Brazil, China, Russia. It's a very curious combination of nations. Brazil, China, Russia, France. It makes.
I don't think anything's actually happening. I think this is just, as I say, slow news day. Fill the papers. Lavrov is visibly in Brazil. I don't think there's any coordination of that with whatever the China-France story is or isn't. I think it's clickbait, most of it. I don't. I mean, does Russia have anything to offer Brazil?
That I have no idea. Does Russia have anything to offer anyone? I mean, they
have oil, but you know.
Well, so does Brazil.
Does it?
Petrobras.
I don't know. Does Brazil have oil of its own, or does it sort of pump it all over from Venezuela?
Tons of. It is a net exporter.
Oh,
It
okay.
has Petrobras. It has everything. So it
Right.
has oil, gas, and the likes.
Yeah, and I imagine Brazil is probably a pretty good place to grow almost anything in the farm line.
It also has growing despair.
I'm
Yes,
growing what?
despair. There's growing despair in Brazil, and that's true.
Well, perfect time to sign up with Russia then, isn't it?
Yeah, if you want to learn how to mess your country up properly, learn from Russia. But that's the best part. Both sides of the political spectrum in Brazil, both sides are so deeply corrupt. It's astonishing.
Well, perhaps they aspire to be Argentina, which is probably not far off. I don't. You get these little, nuggets in Latin America, like Chile and much of the time Colombia, but it just seems to be hard to get two or three democratic centrist governments chained together. How many presidents has Peru sent to prison now out of the last 10?
4.
There's something. It's just incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, they're closely followed by Brazil. And don't forget, then there's other nations such as Ecuador, who generally treat their presidents in a fashion as if they should really voluntarily reintegrate themselves into the food chain. And there's Venezuela, where you might end up being cat food.
Ecuador elected a president called Lenin, did they not? Although there's an Indian prime minister or a regional prime minister called Stalin. He's called MK Stalin.
That's what you get when you have allowed for many decades Russia infiltrating the area and certain people in North America tolerating this. Hello, Walter Duranty, and allowing for Marxist ideas to be profligate and being constantly bandied about, so that the Sendero Luminoso managed to have banking even in the United States of America.
Anyhow, overall, I'm not going to get very excited about Lavrov and Lula, who, that has his own problems, and I don't see Brazil making any kind of relevant strategic move. And the China and Macron thing, Macron is not, I think, no matter how good his discussions are going to be, he's not going to turn up tomorrow standing next to Xi saying we have a 9-point peace plan that supersedes Zelensky.
True.
So,
these are good points. But I think sometimes, Nick, the denial is more important, because Brazil could have provided massive amount of Gepard ammunition and didn't. Brazil has capacity to provide 155 ammunition and didn't. Brazil would have had the opportunity to re-export or allow the repurchase of the Leopards, and in large numbers, don't forget. None of this occurred. I think the denial in this case was the target.
Peter.
Yeah, I was just going to say that does kind of Putin have any trees? Because I think the rainforests need rebuilding a bit.
Okay, that takes the biscuit, Peter. That is the.
We can ship a whole load of pines from Siberia. They do great in the rainforest.
Yeah, thought that as well. But anyway, I'll shut up again.
Thank you, Peter. That was good.
I was just going to say that Brazil has always been called the nation of the future, and it always will be the nation of the future. Chalmer and then Lemaire. Chalmer?
Yeah, Brazil and a whole bunch of other countries have denied themselves into irrelevancy lately. Not that they were particularly relevant to begin with, and France is working their way there. Have we discussed the large transportation of M109, 155 self-propelled howitzers from Italy that are headed towards Ukraine?
Dome has been giving us
something close
updates.
to 100.
Yeah, Doman has been giving us updates as they pass through various towns in the eastern side of Europe, but I think he does that mostly to show off that he knows how to pronounce those towns.
That is a significant number of self-propelled howitzers. And I would say we are not going to see an offensive before they get to Ukraine. But
Did I see that they have turrets?
I don't think the Paladin has a turret.
Okay, there was a
They call it
story
something
about
else in Italy, but essentially it's a Paladin.
Okay, there was a story about some howitzer with a turret that was being supplied, and I would have thought that could be really handy in that you don't have to worry too much about your is it lateral or longitudinal? Your longitudinal attitude. When you need to adjust, you don't have to go down. We got to reverse and sort of move, reverse and then move 0.3 degrees to the left in this mud, which is probably quite awkward. But I thought it was the M109 that had the turret.
I can always be wrong, but I don't think it's turreted.
You're right, and normally being wrong is my prerogative, but yes, you're right.
It's Lemaire, Nick, and then Carrie. Lemaire.
Thank you. Hi. Brazil definitely doesn't need oil from Russia, but what Russia is good at is nuclear technology. So I know that they have about 19 projects around the world. They building nuclear power stations, and Brazil was interested. So who knows?
Lemaire, correction. When you said good at, reasonably tolerable, not good at, cheap and reasonably tolerable.
Yeah, but
because the Canadians and the South Koreans are better at it, the Germans were better at it, and the Americans beat the shit out of everyone at this point in time when it comes to nuclear technology. We just need to put this into perspective, because there's no need for Rosatom other than them being cheap.
Okay, but they have many projects, so maybe Brazil is interested.
Yeah, of course, you need to have some cheap source when you're corrupt. I agree with you.
Okay, that's all I had. Thanks.
Very good point, and thank you.
I'm looking at a video of the M109, and it does appear to have a turret of sorts, but
sorts. You can't turn it around. It doesn't go 360.
No, but you can adjust for a little bit left and right.
Yeah, okay.
Which is handy to have. All right, I am going to
it's
be myself.
Self-propelled howitzer, but it's not a turret. Which I think this is what he was. Chan was.
No. All I meant was I didn't mean it's a tank.
Monty.
No. I didn't mean it's a tank, but it's kind of handy to be able to make that kind of adjustment without having to move the whole vehicle. I thought. I am going to.
Chan, can we ask this, Chan? Chan, did this answer your question? Is that what you're looking at? Because it's not a 360 turret.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I was thinking, is that it wasn't. It's not a full traversing turret.
Yes, it is a traversable turret, but it's not one which goes 360.
Okay. No, I mean, even at the start of the full-scale invasion, I did in fact know that not everything that has tracks and a tank and a gun is a tank, and I know a lot of people didn't manage that, and I don't consider myself a military equipment expert by any means, but I was aware of the concept of the self-propelled gun. I'm going to beam myself out of the co-host seat now, so and go to bed. So enjoy the rest of the early North American evening there, Alan, and Prince will be dropping in next to you shortly. Good night, everyone.
Good night, Nick, and thank you.
I was just looking at a picture and some specs, and I will stand corrected and say that that is a turret.
Yeah, it is.
That it is
As we
turreted.
said, it's turreted, but it's
Yeah.
from what I can see, you can't turn it 360. And that was my question. I understood that this was your point. It's traversable, it's turreted, yes, but you can't go 360 as I understand it, because otherwise it would not be able to deliver that power of self-propelled howitzer. But if we can get someone who has been driving M109 who can tell us exactly how many degrees that thing can go, would be delighted.
There you go. I think 110 of these self-propelled howitzers are on their way from Italy right now, and they're important to have. Carrie, you had your hand up. It went down.
Can I pretend that I put my hand up? I don't know why it went down.
Yes, go ahead and pretend. We will too.
So I was just going to say, it's, I'm sort of saying it as a joke, but it's a serious point. Russia does have a lot of trees because they have basically, as I'm sure most of us know on space, they have been deforesting and logging every single bit of timber they can get in the occupied areas of Ukraine, in addition to stripping the hospitals and the science labs and every other thing they can get their hands on. They have stripped the earth, and this is completely separate from, you know, the destruction as a result of warfare. But yeah, they've been happily going across every single part of Ukraine that they have currently occupied and taking away, cutting down every bit of timber they can get their hands on. I just thought it was worth reiterating that for people who might not be aware of it.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Carrie. This is exactly what Russia has done. There were satellite pictures of basically a denuded forest. I don't know if it was in Donetsk or in occupied Luhansk, but they have just absolutely stolen everything they can possibly get their hands on, from art in art museums. The Kherson Art Museum was looted. Trees have been cut down, and of course, appliances by the carload have been stolen and shipped back to Russia. The looting is taking place at an unbelievable scale, frankly, and we won't even know about it until Ukraine liberates the occupied territories. I just want to welcome up Prince as my co-host for the night. Great to be with you again.
Good to see you, Alan. Hello, Carrie and Peter and Chalmer and Axel and Lemur and other people that I see down in the gallery. Just starting the night off here to let you know that there are some air raid sirens going off. There have been several drones shot down earlier today, and I'm seeing reports that we've had some more shot down in Odessa recently. So we currently have air raids going on in Odessa, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Dnipro. In addition, of course, to the Luhansk and Crimea, which are always red. So that's what I have at the moment. And I will sit here and have a topic ready for when Alan says, have a topic ready.
Well, you know, Prince, I think the other thing we will do a little bit later tonight is read together from Timothy Snyder's little book on tyranny. It's a little book in size. It's a big book in thought. Both you and I have ordered it. We have it on our nightstands, and as I like to say, it's a book you can open anywhere. It's only 100 odd pages long, but it's a book you can open up anywhere and have a thought to turn around in your mind for the rest of your day. And if you're in the United States, it will make you think twice about what is happening here politically, but it will make you think more deeply about the threat to democracy around the world. This is a little book on tyranny by Timothy Snyder, a professor at Yale University. So I think we'll delve into that a little bit later tonight too, Prince. Have your book handy.
I have had my book on my person the whole time since I got it. And actually, I even sleep with it in bed. I know that sounds really, really weird, but I have about 10 or 15 minutes before I cannot keep my eyes open anymore once I get into bed. And it is just enough time to finish one little section um, before I drift off to sleep. And I've kept it in my pocket. I've got a hoodie on, and I've kept it in my hoodie pocket all throughout the day. And just whenever I have a chance, I read a few lines just to refresh myself because sometimes my reading comprehension isn't all that great. That's been a problem since childhood, and I work with it by reading repeatedly, and then I start to remember things better. So yeah, it's a sweet little handy book, and yeah. So when I start to drift off to sleep, I just put it down on the other side of the bed, and first thing I reach for in the morning is that book again. So I make sure I have it with me all day here, so that I think it's one that I really need to absorb.
Very good. I just want to ask folks to retweet this space. Here we are just beginning North American MriyaReport time. It's 7:30 on the East Coast in the United States. It's 4:30 on the West Coast. And so I hope lots of American listeners, lots of North American listeners are beginning to tune in. We can greet more of them if you retweet this space. It's MriyaReport.org. We're here 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, supporting Ukraine and bringing you verified news from Ukraine and Ukrainian voices, like Verlaine, who is in the Rubige Rapid Response Brigade. We're raising money for the Rubige Rapid Response Brigade, especially for reconnaissance drones and reconnaissance communications. This is incredibly important as we prepare for the Ukrainian counteroffensive coming sometime soon to a space near you. That space being MriyaReport. So please make a generous donation. You can go up into the nest, and the second tweet will take you right to a PayPal donation page. You can see what the Rubige unit needs, but right now we're emphasizing reconnaissance drones and radio communication for reconnaissance. Just be as generous as you possibly can. I do have, I know, Prince, both you and I are probably looking right now for the news items we want to bring to you. And we will bring them up as we move on here. There have not been significant changes on the battle line in Ukraine. Ordinarily, Chuck Farrer would be here on a Tuesday night with bullet points, but he's traveling between undisclosed locations, and it will be back with us next week. And so I want to commend people to listen in on Thursday when Nuno Felix is here on Thursday afternoon Eastern time. He'll bring you a detailed update on the battlefield. But as I say, no significant changes. There's intense fighting in Bakhmut. The situation in Avdiivka has improved. And Russians continue to launch missile attacks and artillery shelling all along the line of engagement. So Russians continue, especially, to hit civilian structures in Ukrainian cities and to strike Ukrainian infrastructure. But I would also note that Russian casualties, which had been approaching or exceeding 1,000 a day just a couple of weeks ago, have dropped by about half. You might wonder what this means. My analysis would be that the Russians have reduced the number of attacks. This indeed is confirmed by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and by ISW, the Institute for Study of War. Why are they reducing their attacks along the line of engagement? It's because they are preparing for the Ukrainian counteroffensive. They are preparing to become a defensive force after failing to be an offensive force. Prince, back to you for just a moment.
Absolutely. Not a problem at all. And I hope that you guys cannot hear my lawnmower going, as my lawn is being mowed for the first time this year, and it is overdue. I am going to bring up a subject. I'm sure Alan is still listening, that we talked about a bit the other day. And didn't get a chance to bring it up yesterday, but I'm not going to let it go because it's one that annoys me. Day before yesterday, I talked about a headline that I saw as I was going through the room with the TV, and the TV was on, and it was a headline that said, Russia resettling Ukrainian refugees to remote part of Siberia. So that was what was the headline on the television. I looked considerably for the article, the video clip that they played on TV, until it finally did come out after midnight that night. And what I found was the video story and, of course, an article that went along with it. Now, the article and the video story are very, very similar. The article adds some additional color and detail, which is fine. But this is the part that frustrated me. The same piece of information, basically, that was on television, in a video on the website, and in an article on the website, basically all with the same information, but three different headlines that could make you think three different things. So the first headline, I'm going to go ahead and read these one after the other. So I'll repeat the first one again. Russia resettling Ukrainian refugees to remote parts of Siberia. The headline that was on the video was Ukrainian refugee in Russia tells CNN why she's forbidden to return home. The third one, which was on the article, says some Ukrainians who fled Russia's war ended up in Siberia. It's unclear if or when they'll return home. I just see big, huge differences in what each of those headlines could mean. And I tweeted this out. And if you want to see, it is my pinned tweet on my profile. So feel free to go and take a peek at it. If looking at what I'm saying makes more sense to you than hearing what I'm saying. Also in there are included, in the thread, are included a link to the video story and the article. But, you know, for me, it just frustrated me because of the three different messages. And what it comes down to me is that these people are not refugees. They would never have had to leave their home had it not been for Russia invading their country. You can hear these people who say, yes, I'm probably going to stay in Russia after this is over. They're saying these kinds of things now, but they're saying also, but I don't have a job that I like and a job that I love and a home that I love. You know, a woman who had a good career when she was living in Ukraine, who has been deported or left willingly. And I have that in quote marks because she never would have left her home had Russia not invaded. You know, she had a good career, a job she loved, a home she loved. Now she's working in a food factory in Siberia and struggling and having a very hard time making it. So, Alan, I'm going to give it to you because I'm sure you have comments on this.
Well, I think you're completely right, Prince. These Ukrainians would never remain in Russia. They've been abducted. They've been sent far away from their homeland, sent far away from their culture. All they really want to do is return. Indeed, their return is one of the 10 points of President Zelensky's peace plan. And
Well, you know, some of them have a fear of returning, though. That's part of the problem. Some of them have a fear of returning because the Russian propaganda that they've been exposed to for the last year is telling them that Ukraine will see them as criminals. Ukraine doesn't want them back because they have gone to Russia and have settled there in Russia during this war, that Ukraine doesn't want them back. So they're being fed propaganda that is leading them to believe that even if the war is over, even when the war is over, they can't go back because they are going to be seen as collaborators.
well, I'm not sure if they'll be seen as collaborators. Are you really? I mean,
I don't think that they will be seen as collaborators. I know they won't. In fact, if my memory serves, you know, they got comment from the Ukrainian government that said, we will not see those people that way. Those are not how we see these people. We want these people back. But that message is not getting to the Ukrainian people who have been shipped off to Siberia. That message is not getting to them. The message they are getting is the Russian propaganda that is lying to them, that is telling to them that they will be seen as a criminal.
I'm sure Ukraine will find a way to get a message to these Ukrainians who've been deported to Siberia and other distant places inside Russia. And it would be so sad if these Ukrainians thought that they could not return to Ukraine. There are collaborators. They're inside Ukraine. They're in Luhansk. They're in Donetsk. They're in Zaporizhia. They're in Crimea. And these collaborators will be apprehended. Some collaborators already have been apprehended. And this is something that Ukraine will continue to do as it liberates territory occupied by Russia, as it reunites its nation inside its sovereign borders. But you know, these Ukrainians, it is such a sad chapter, not only in this war, but obviously in their lives, that they have been deported, probably through infiltration camps where they underwent interrogation, and we don't know what else, to be resettled. And I put that word in air quotes, somewhere deep in Russia. They have no life there. They know that. Their life is in Ukraine, and Ukraine will bring them back. I have no doubt about that, Prince.
I think we should hear what Carrie has to say, because Carrie popped her hand right up there. I hope you survived your all-nighter, Carrie, and I hope you were doing well.
I did survive my all-nighter. I was saying yesterday I managed to have a shorter day, which was quite good. On a Monday, I finished a little bit earlier. So in the end, I was up for about 30 hours working straight, but it was worth it. It got a load of stuff out the way. I was just going to back up what you said, Prince. I saw, and I don't have it at the tip of my fingers, but I did see the official statement as well saying that they wouldn't be considered as collaborators. And in that same statement, I think it did reiterate the aspect of the Geneva Convention that covers that. But it's the same, telling these people that they will be seen as collaborators is a lot akin to, or is in the same sort of ilk as telling the children who've been stolen that their parents don't want them anymore. I mean, it's for a child, we cannot imagine what that must feel like to each of those poor children to be told that their parents don't want them. And they're not getting that message once, they're getting that message 24 hours a day. And I hate to think, I really hope and pray that they're not being physically hurt in the way that we know a lot of adults have been, but they will be psychologically hurt every day. There will be ongoing indoctrination in terms of them not being wanted, in addition to telling them, re-educating them about how amazing Russia is. So yeah, we've got to do our work our hardest to help Ukraine to get all of its citizens back home. And I'm sure that negotiations, a peace plan, all the talk of the peace plan, as you say, it is in the 10-point plan from Ukraine, and those are the only terms upon which Ukraine should be negotiating. That's one of the very few things that they will be negotiating on, I'm sure.
Well, one of the things we talked about yesterday, I believe, possibly the day before, were green corridors that Russia had agreed to. These were primarily from Mariupol, and these were green corridors for the purpose of Ukrainian citizens to escape Russian assaults on Mariupol. Two things happened. One, the Russians fired on these green corridors. So a green corridor is a road that you can escape through. It has a green light. It is supposedly secure. But the Russians instead fired artillery on these green corridors. The second thing to note, the green corridors led in only one direction, back to Russia or into Russia. They didn't allow these Ukrainian citizens to go back into Ukraine, to Kyiv or to Lviv, or even into the European Union. Although some were able to do that, the majority were herded into Russia. And this has happened throughout occupied Ukraine. When there are no active assaults, no active battles taking place, Russians are constantly interviewing and identifying Ukrainians to be sent into Russia through infiltration camps.
Can I just follow up on that, Alan, as well?
Yes, Carrie, go ahead.
Because also it's important for us to remember that, because this is going back a long time now, isn't it? But the Red Cross, I see that as collusion. The Red Cross colluded with Russia to agree that and to theoretically be the insurance policy on those green corridors. So I see that as a double betrayal, both agreeing with Russia to do that and then not holding up the agreement, not enforcing that agreement, not working hard to try and make sure that that agreement would stand. We sort of moved past that quite a long time ago now, and we just discount the Red Cross and their role. But that was what was happening at the time.
Yet Ukraine has been very displeased with the Red Cross, understandably so. Not only has the International Red Cross failed to be able to contact and interview and help Ukrainian POWs inside Russia, the International Red Cross has shirked its duty in helping Ukrainians illegally deported into Russia. And so Ukraine has issued uh, a harsh critique of the International Red Cross, and we understand that, and the cooperation of the Red Cross with Ukraine is at an all-time low. The International Red Cross is simply not doing its job. Hunter, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Alan. So I hear the language that we're using for the tactics of psychological manipulation that the Russians are using, reprogramming. I would revert back to using the good old term of brainwashing. It's simply very straight to the point. It's quite a bit more harsh, but it's to the point of exactly what they're doing. And I am, let's say, more on the edge of non-politically correct kind of a person. One of my good friends who was a state representative labeled me as the type of guy that walks into a room and just drops a truth bomb in the middle of all the politicians trying to beat around the bush about a particular point. So I'm listening to everyone's language because I learn better ways to say things. Alan, of course, you're spectacular about how you put things together. And the other speaker, I'm sorry, I've missed your name. Very well said as well. But let's just call it what it is. They're brainwashing the children. They're brainwashing the adults. They're sequestering them so they can manipulate them psychologically, and turn them into psychologically dependent on the system in which they're being held captive. Pretty straightforward to me, but yeah, it's just a terrible thing all the way around. I mean, I haven't heard numbers lately, but are we in the millions of forced capitulation, forced resettlement for the Ukrainians? I don't have any numbers handy, and I'm driving, so I can't look them up. But thank you.
Hunter, you're exactly right. It is brainwashing. There's no question about that. That's exactly the word we should use. We are not in the millions. We're in the tens of thousands. In terms of the number of Ukrainian children, it is estimated more than 16,000. That's a significant number. And only a few hundred of these children have been able to be brought back to Ukraine by their parents or their grandparents or siblings or other family relatives. And I will say one thing. When I see the Ukrainian children who have been returned to Ukraine interviewed and talk about that experience, they are just goddamn tough. And they are able to say to their Russian captors, "You lying," fill in the word you want to use, but they have been able to say, "You're lying to us. You're lying to me about my parents. You're lying to me about what's happening in Ukraine." They are just mentally tough and physically tough children, and their children, and they stood up to their Russian captors. But Hunter, we're not into the millions. We're into the tens of thousands uh, of Ukrainian children and Ukrainian adults who have been sent through infiltration camps, possibly over 100,000.
Just terrible all the way around. I can't wait till we can get the right people in the right spaces and get that situation remedied as quickly as possible. It's just it's unconscionable to me to see this happening. I mean, it just bothers me. I mean, children. I mean, Alan, they're kids. You know, I mean, what are you doing? You know, it's just it boggles the mind. It really does.
It does. You know, Russia calls these Ukrainian children and Ukrainian adults refugees. They're not refugees. They're not refugees at all, as Prince points out. These are Ukrainians, individuals who have been ripped out of their country and sent through infiltration camps into Russia. They are captives. That's what they are. Maybe they are hostages. Maybe that's what Russia thinks of them as for some kind of future negotiation. Because we know that, as I've said before, one of the 10 points in President Zelensky's peace plan is for the return of every single Ukrainian abducted into Russia. Now, I happen to think this will take probably years. I hope that's not the case, but I think it probably will take years. And there will be Ukrainian hostages held in Russia for purposes of negotiation or leverage that must be returned to Ukraine, and it will be done as Russia does everything in a halting, piecemeal way. If there is an agreement Russia has signed, and then it can obstruct, trust me, they'll do it. Carrie.
I was just going to say that it's something we were talking about in the past, and this is into the future, but there's a cross fingers possibility that if there is a dissolution of the various, because as we all know, Russia is absolutely immense and contains so many different ethnic groups, and one possibility is that if Russia does begin to break apart, that the breakaway areas, part of their own negotiations to try and re-enter the modern world, will be that they will negotiate to return the Ukrainian citizens that they have within what they perceive as their boundaries, their borders. But I mean, obviously, this is down the line, but that is one of the things that could happen, that could mean that it may happen sooner rather than 5, 10, 15 years, by which time those children have become integrated, sadly, within Russia. But that's hopefully a possibility, that dissolution will then mean that there'll be different talks taking place that may return people more quickly.
We'll just have to wait and see. When Ukraine wins this war, we'll have to wait and see. There are so many things that Ukraine will have to do. We all have seen the cities that Russia has destroyed, Mariupol, Bakhmut, Mariinka, and so many other villages throughout Ukraine, villages and towns. All of this Ukraine must rebuild, and they must rebuild it, frankly, with Russian reparations and the value and money of Russian assets secreted around the world. These must be discovered by Western governments and given to Ukraine for rebuilding purposes. That's just one of the things. And of course, all the Ukrainian citizens must be returned. And the other long-term project that Ukraine faces is demining Ukraine. So many mines have been laid by Russians, and so much unexploded ordnance lies in farmers' fields. There are demining operations going on right now. but the total demining of Ukraine could take as long as 20 years. And I can tell you that to date, 750 Ukrainians have suffered casualties by inadvertently stepping on mines off the road, in the forest, on a farm field. And these casualties are going to be inflicted long after this war is over. We know this from other war zones around the world. Let's go to Adam and then to Sky Kiss. Adam. Adam, are you speaking into a muted mic?
I was running with some dishes because I'm multitasking. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Adam.
Okay, sorry. What the heck was I going to say? Prince, I was washing dishes. So did you post the actual video in the nest that you were speaking of, where they're talking to the Ukrainians in wherever the heck, Siberia, on CNN or which?
I didn't, but I can. I'll do that real quick.
A question that I would hope that they ask them at some point is, were you pro-Russian before all of this happened? And you know, you might not get a honest answer from that, and everyone in Ukraine has a different political miasma in their mind, like all of us do, and who knows what a person to person can understand between each other. But I was just thinking, with the filtration camps, as sick as it is there, it's like a series of filters, right? Like the obvious, you know, rabid Azov people and their children are like, quote unquote.
Hey, Adam, can I just break in and ask you a question?
Sure.
If you're a Ukrainian in an infiltration camp inside Russia, and you're talking to anyone, whether it's a Russian interrogator or a news reporter, and you're asked that question, are you pro-Russian? How would you answer
Fair.
that? Or would you feel that your answer could possibly put your life at risk?
I guess it would be a journalist would be able to figure out a delicate way to answer that question or have a conversation with them about it. Because my point was that I was getting to is that the people with trezub tattoos, like the trident, would have been, quote unquote, filtered, whatever the hell that means, at the beginning of the filtration camp, you know, and they're probably buried in mass graves. And so the people who made it through, I'm sure there's a certain percentage of them, because there is a certain percentage, or was a certain percentage before the hostilities really ramped up, of people in Ukraine who did feel pro-Russian and were waiting for the soldiers, as it were. Like the woman that Prince described, that maybe, you know, loved her life before and sort of maybe kind of went along with I'm sure there's people who went along with the quote unquote evacuations because they might have, because of Russian propaganda that was pumped into Ukraine, like it was through all of Eastern Europe forever. And they were victims
or
of it.
Adam, or Adam, because they feared for their safety.
I'm not saying I'm not saying it's everybody,
I'm
just saying there's going to be a certain percentage of people who had those feelings before. You can't deny that, right? Like they might have ended up there. I'm not saying let me get to my point. I'm sorry if I'm being too long-winded. Just let me finish. I forget what I was going to say, but I would be really interested to honest conversation with some of those people, if they were pro-Russian before, how they feel now, particularly the woman who had a great career, as she said, that she missed working in the food factory. That's kind of all I was saying. There might be a few people in the group who had those feelings before, because they did, and they were victims. I'm not saying they were bad people or anything. They were victims of the propaganda that was pumped to them. You know what I'm saying?
I think I do know what you're saying. And they were victims of the propaganda. Ukraine has held two uh, national referenda about being an independent nation. And in both of these referenda, Ukrainians voted to be independent, including Crimea. Obviously Ukrainians did not vote 100% for independence. There were some who wanted to remain a part of Russia, to hail back to their situation as a province of the Soviet Union. But Ukraine did vote in every oblast with a majority to become an independent nation. And so, yes, you're right. There are some Ukrainians who were pro-Russian, and they probably voted that way. What do they feel today when they see the destruction that Russia has brought to their country, brought to the cities where they lived, and were free people deciding their own lives, and living peacefully? I'm pretty sure they've changed their minds.
Yeah,
Aren't you,
I'm
Adam?
totally sure they changed their minds. I'm just saying it would be very interesting to have an honest conversation. I totally get your point that no one's going to get a correct answer out of "Are you pro-Russian?" when they're in the middle of Sevastopol, but yeah, it'd be very interesting to see some of those people, because obviously the people who in Ukraine that they also have surveyed since the war has started is now it's like 98-99%. There's very few actual pro-Russians, and they're all just Baba's brainwashed, unfortunately, from Soviet times.
You're right. It's an interesting question, and I'm sure that there will be interviews and first person interviews that we hear after the war, and we will hear from Ukrainians who change their minds. We and we will understand why and how they change their minds. It will be because they lost loved ones. It will be because the Russians destroyed their homes, destroyed their cities, and destroyed their lives. Uh, so I think these are studies that will take place after Ukraine wins this war. I want to go to Will and then to Sky Kiss. Will.
Hey, good morning, Alan. Good morning, Prince. To add to that discussion, the point, I take Adam's point, particularly, and I can tell you from my time living in Russia and the Russians that I know, Adam, it greatly surprised me when this war started. The small, very small plurality, but relatively vocal people who were willing to stand up and the Russian nationalists came out of the woodwork. Some people that it greatly surprised me of my Russian friends in Russia. The number of people, as I say, small in number, very small, maybe 20-30% of the people that I knew well, that came out of the woodwork and were all for Z war, had the ribbons on, and were wanting to make sure that they got the remaining foreigners out of the country and things like that. So there were a certain number of people that laying in the weeds who were envious, I guess, or resentful of what's going on in the West, and do believe and have bought into the propaganda of Greater Russia. But there's a larger group of people, a much larger group, maybe 40-50% of the population, that basically just feel cowed by what's going on. And as Alan stated, if the only green zone out of a city after it's conquered by Russia is back to Russia, and you go through filtration camps, as you said, and anybody who's even suspected of being problematic for Russia is filtered out, and we'll find out what happened to them. Large of the people who are cowed, say the right thing, and have been shipped off to Siberia. Those people need to know what those people need to know. We need to if we can find a way to keep our voices heard by those people, is that Ukraine does want you back. We're welcome there. I mean, not only were you welcome there, it's your home. It's your home as much as anybody who speaks Ukrainian. And in my travels through Eastern Ukraine, and you can see it from interviews on the battlefield now, there are a whole bunch of people, because of Russification of the east of Ukraine, that speak Russian on a day-to-day basis. They do. And they were speaking Russian to the interviewers on the battlefield about what they thought. And all these Russian-speaking Ukrainians were all for Ukraine. They weren't for Russia. Don't be confused by a language someone speaks to define that as their nationality. That's the big mistake Russia's making. Believe me, the vast majority of Ukrainians living even in the East still voted, as Alan said, still voted 60, 80% for Ukraine being its own country in 1991, and voted in the election where Zelensky got elected for a majority for him. Even in Crimea, that has been so incredibly heavily Russified by the Russian state after its occupation. That area, it was voted 54%, which would be considered a landslide in a U.S. election. 54% of the Russians in 1991, or the people in 1991 living in Crimea, voted for independence from Russia. And so that's why Russia has tried to, after it captured it, severely further Russify that area so they can try to make this case when they're the one controlling the elections, controlling the dialogue, and literally controlling the people. Because here's another little statistic for you. If you happen to be living in Russia right now, have a look at your own country. Go find out the statistics on this number. Do you know that the total number of police, FSB, security forces, riot police, OMA, all of them, do you know what those number in Russia? 1.5% of the population. Look around your country or your state or your region and have a look at what the percentage of police force, state, federal, local, all of them. Have a look and see what the number is near you, because I guarantee you it's nowhere near 1.5% of the population who is repressively overseeing now all of the people that lived in Russia, especially those people that they've transported to Siberia, much like they did. I mean, this is as they've always done. When they wanted to solve a problem with the Tartars, or they wanted to solve a problem with the kulaks, or they wanted to solve a problem with the Jews, they wanted to solve a problem with anyone, they exported those people to a place where they assumed they would die out in Siberia, and they imported Russians to take their place. Exactly what they're doing in Mariupol now. And, it's right out of the KGB playbook. This is the way Russia always plays things. So if there's any discussion about what Ukraine wants to do after Ukraine is whole again, that will be up to the Ukrainians once they control the entire area of their population, and they can have a frank and open exchange of people, because the minority of people that you're talking about in the Donbass and Luhansk that actually want to be part of Russia will almost certainly be allowed to do so once the territory's back. But you got to vote with your feet. I'm talking to you about this with this American accent because I immigrated to Australia 35 years ago, because I voted with my feet. I did not feel like I was a good American, that I fit in there. And that's what people need to do. People need to vote with their feet. If you don't want to live in the country that you're living in, move to Russia. They should be given the opportunity to do that. And all the people I knew in Russia that came out for Z war and all this going on now, those people I'm not taking those people back. Those people continually lied to me for the 14 years that I knew them, and didn't tell me their resentment, and didn't tell me all the grievances that they've hidden, and didn't tell me how much they admire this Ruski Mir sense of the world, and how they were just using us all from the West to help them enrich themselves so that they could try to conquer their neighbor and go back on their imperialist ways. So, I mean, I understand. I think there are, and you see from the battlefield also, you see a certain amount if you speak Russian or you speak Ukrainian, you can hear the interviews. You can hear there's a certain number of people that are still living in Bakhmut that are, in fact, waiting for Russia to liberate them, if you will. There is a tiny percentage of those people, but those people need to either decide they want to be part of Ukraine after the war is over or immigrate to Russia. I'm sure they'll be afforded the opportunity to do so if they think that's a better system. And that's what's fair and reasonable, not invading someone, taking them over, and then holding sham elections like they've done, or forcing people. And this is why they're doing this. You know, Russia takes over an area, they force all the people in that area, like in Kherson, to take Russian passports. And if you don't, then you're not allowed to travel anymore, even around the country, right? You're not allowed to travel around your region unless you're carrying your Russian identification papers, because they want to claim all those people as their own. See, these are the people we came to. They voluntarily went and got Russian passports. You know, living under a level of coercion like that, nobody believes that is true. And, you know, we see it for what it is. And I just hope through the VPN connections and the conversations that we still maintain, and hopefully there's people from Russia listening in who were exported there from Ukraine. I hope all the people. I mean, I don't know that they do, but I certainly hope everybody living in the occupied territories of Luhansk, Donetsk, and Kherson, I hope they know that that they are all welcome back into Ukraine. Not welcome back into Ukraine. They're going to be liberated by their own country, and when they are liberated, as soon as possible, then everybody's going to get a right to choose what they want to do. And Ukraine will be whole again and probably have elections that show similar things to what has happened in the past with Zelensky's election. Ukraine's thrown off its tyranny, and it has free and fair elections, and it has reduced corruption. It has made things better. The railways run on time. They're exporting electricity again, even though there's a war on and Russia's targeting all that stuff. Ukraine is going from strength to strength, and I bet a whole bunch of the people of that tiny minority that said they wanted to be Russian before the war, I'll bet when those folks have an opportunity to vote with their feet after this is all over, they vote to stay back in Russia with their own movement. Thanks, Alan.
Well, you know, Will, when Ukraine liberated Kherson City, we saw the outpouring of relief and celebration. And I think we're going to see the same kinds of outpouring of relief and celebration when Ukraine liberates Donetsk City, for example, when it liberates Melitopol, when it reclaims Mariupol, and even when it takes back Crimea. I don't think there is a single place in Ukraine waiting to be liberated by Ukrainian troops that in which you will not see celebration and joy and relief and thanks, gratitude, and this is what is going to pull this nation back together for the future. So I just want to let Adam back in here for a follow up. Go to lunchtime, then to Lemaire. Adam.
Oh yeah, totally agree with everything Will said. It is actually mind blowing to me how close these jerks are sticking to their ancient playbook that they have used even in Tsarist times with the Russification and the moving of people around. It's so disgusting and gross. I don't know what else I had to say beyond that. Can't remember right now. Retweet the space, donate to Maria Aid and MriyaReport.
Thank you, Adam. Lunchtime. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Alan. Thanks very much. Well, you know, on the whole, I agree with the sentiments that previous speakers have expressed, but I'd just like to say this whole topic is kind of, it's done to death, because there is no doubt whatsoever that you know, the Ukrainian people, whatever language they speak, are Ukrainian and identify as Ukrainian. But I mean, I don't understand why this keeps coming up as some sort of discussion point. There is no discussion really to be had here. You know, but anyway, but I'll turn a page on that. I will say though that a previous speaker said something that's slightly, well, they said something along the lines of filtering, whatever that means, and then the subsequent speaker said, you know, people that got filtered will find out what happened to them. At the risk of being quite grim, it's quite clear what happened to the people that were filtered. You know, there isn't really much scope for doubt there. If you look at the mass graves in MriyaReport and the rate at which they have increased and continue to increase, it's very clear what happened to the people that were filtered, along with several other people that weren't perhaps visibly filtered, right? What is happening is genocide in Ukraine. That is happening right now. And although it might not be polite to call it that, it might not be polite to mention it explicitly as what it is, that is what is happening. The wholesale murder of people is taking place. And you can see that. There is proof of that, as I say, in the mass graves, the numbers keep ticking up, and you can see the area they occupy increase day by day. So just to draw the veil back a little bit, what's happening to those people, what's happened to those people that were filtered, is not a mystery, unfortunately.
Just to be clear, I was just using a polite euphemism. I, of course, realize that's what filtration means.
Yeah, I figured as much, but it just, like, you know, out of these polite euphemisms comes a sort of, I don't know, a vast sort of reduction in the perception of what is happening. Do you know what
I'm
I mean?
a construction
So
worker,
I think
and I struggle to not cuss my face off because I am a Ukrainian, and I don't know what I said and what I said if I was being too polite, but I hate these. I just don't want to add to the swear jar because I don't want to be the guy that makes your lovely editor who's a volunteer work more. But I know it's genocide and I hate them, and I really apologize if I in any way did not use strong enough language to condemn anything. I was just in my whole thing, and to bring up a point of I was not saying there was any percentage beyond maybe 1 or 2% of people at the point of the full-scale invasion who would still consider themselves pro-Russian on whatever spectrum you would like to find that on. I was just saying it would be interesting to have a conversation with one of those people after making it through a filtration camp and seeing everyone with a Trezub tattoo getting hauled out to the back and shot and burned in a pit and whatever. I just trying to sound more polite on the space because I'm actually live with a lot of anger about this every day, and I have a hard time to contain it. I love you guys.
I think you're in good company here on that score. But Will, you know, to answer your question about that a little bit, I don't know if you remember earlier on in the war, there was footage of Babusha like going out to greet the Ukrainian soldiers that were liberating the area she was in, the village she was in, and she came bringing bread or whatever. But she was actually pro-Russian, right? And she came out to greet them, thinking they were Russian, but they weren't Russian, and they treated her with immense kindness. So you do have like the occasional person that's, as we were saying, you know, that's been sort of subjected to this sort of propaganda. And by the way, this sort of propaganda doesn't just infect Ukraine. You have these sort of, like, I have a friend in Estonia actually who she was telling me that basically there's little sort of pockets of the country which are firmly on, you know, firmly believe these sort of Russian channels and firmly believe the propaganda and would like nothing more than the Russian world to come back to Estonia, basically. So it's not just this a malevolent sort of influence in one place alone. It's in a lot of places where Russia would like to salami slice a little bit off for itself, as it continues to want to do, despite being the largest country on the planet. But yeah, so no, please don't think I was having a go at you personally. And I just think that sometimes we draw a veil over what is actually happening. And in this space of all places, we should be pretty unsparing about what is going on.
Lunchtime, my favorite videos of babushkas are the ones in Kherson. I think they were the babushka who stole ammunition from the Russians and hid it and brought it out to the Ukrainian soldiers liberating Kherson city, and the Ukrainians who buried Ukrainian flags under the pavement tiles of Kherson. And after they were liberated, they went out and got those flags and greeted the liberating Ukrainian troops with them. Those are my favorite videos of babushkas. I just want to go to Lamare, Jamie, and then back to Will. Lamare.
Thank you. I'm originally from Soviet Union and Ukraine, and I moved in 90s to United States. But naturally, I was watching what was going on, and I noticed that ethnical Russians from various republics, many of them wanted to move to Russia. But Russia actually was not granting citizenship to Russian ethnical Russians, so they can move and freely live. I didn't understand it because I thought, why? They have depopulation crisis, but they were not given citizenship. Now I am realizing that they wanted the people stay where they are and wait for them so they can be liberated together with the land. So yeah, that's what I wanted. And people in Ukraine it was a good place to live, but there were ethnic Russian in Central Asia, where it was much more harder to survive, and they were not given citizenship either. Like Germany gives German citizenship to ethnic Germans and Poland, but not Russia. They waited to get lands back. Yeah, that's it. So now they
Thank
have,
you.
yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Lamare. And of course, the United States gives citizenship to people from all around the world. I wish the United States allowed more immigrants to enter the country and to give them citizenship, but at least. And Lamare, you need to mute your mic.
Oh,
but at least the United States does open citizenship to tens of thousands of immigrants every single year. To Jamie, to Will, to Dr. Nick. Jamie.
I was just reminded that today is Yom HaShoah, still, the day of remembrance of the Holocaust. And people are being filtered through camps. People are being shot. People are being transited, put through camps, filtered. These words, most of my family remained in Europe. I lack lots of cousins, lots of people that I should know. They were in the Poland area. They were transited. They were moved. They were not allowed to have
chance to get back to their original cities. We can never forget. And yet it seems like we are. It seems like that never forget slogan is just a slogan. And it makes me want to cry. And I don't know.
So Jamie, I just want to say, never forget is not a slogan here at MriyaReport. And what we think here is that Ukrainians remind us every day what we need to remember. And go ahead, Jamie.
No, and that is why this place is so important. That's why personally I'm reaching out to a lot of people in my community that can do stuff for the troops and in kind. But this place is special. I realize that every day. We tell their stories, and that's something I don't know. I just realized it was Yom HaShoah tonight, and then got emotional hearing of all of these people stolen. It just put the two together. Gosh, I'm just blabbering and having word salad.
I understand, Jamie. What I really thank you for is putting it together. Not everyone is able to do that. And here at MriyaReport, we really do want to help people put history together. And so if we look back to the 1930s and Nazi Germany, if we talk about Stalinist Russia, and we talk about Putin's imperialist Russia today, we do it for a reason. We do it to connect events and to connect the imperative that Russia in particular seems to believe it has to be an imperial nation, to commit genocide, to believe it's exceptional in some way. And all of this we talk about. The Russian ideas that are simply not acceptable, we expose. That's why we're here. And Jamie, that's why I'm glad you're also here. Thank you.
Can I ask everyone to call their congressmen, to call their leaders, to say it wasn't enough back then. We've got to give these people a fighting chance. Please. My family's not around. Please let these people have their families in 75 years. So reach out to your representatives. And there's a wonderful resist bot on Twitter that you can even text to. I'll send Alan the information and he can put it up. And it will send your letter to your senators and your congressmen for free.
Thank you, Jamie. Thank you very much. That's an important thing for everyone to have available to them. So please send it to me. I'll get it up in the nest. Angry ants Bill Attig is here often talking about exactly the same thing. Jeff Fisher, Colonel Jeff Fisher with the Dish for Fish, has connected lots of our listeners with their representatives, and we make every effort here in the United States and Canada, United Kingdom, in every EU country to contact our elected representatives and tell them how much we support Ukraine and how important it is for them to send everything Ukraine needs. So I think the order of hands is Will, lunchtime, Dr. Nick, M. Let's all keep this conversation fast. Will, go ahead.
Okay, I've got fast. I just wanted to comment on what you said earlier, Alan, which is my favorite babushkas was the lady who gave the Russian soldiers sunflower seeds in the first couple of days after the war, and the lady up in Bucha who cooked poison into cakes and pies for them to steal. Love those ladies. Love your work. And now that I see Dr. Nick is here. This is the time when I hold her responsible for the entire population of Florida. And please explain to me how an anti-racist move, Black Lives Matter, got co-opted by peace at any cost peoples and infiltrated to become Russian agents. And given that Russia has got to be one of the most racist countries on the world right now, please explain, Dr. Nick.
Will, we're going to get to Dr. Nick's explanation right now.
Okay, well, this is it's kind of complicated, but at the same time, it isn't. There's many layers to this. So the situation here has been going on for years, apparently, where Russian agents, with I guess the main contact person for the Uhurus was Ivanov. But this group, they're like an African liberation group, and this guy Ivanov, as well as a few other agents, allegedly, been working or was working with them to do things like, show up at protests, to organize political candidates to run in elections. It's it makes a lot of sense. I hate to say it. It's the kind of thing that Russia just does. They got very blatant after the very minor types of punishment they received in relation to, the election interference in 2016. So this is something that they have been doing allegedly across the country. So let me just put it this way. The big picture, obviously, is that Russia has an intent to destabilize U.S. politics. They want to make us basically eat each other alive. And this is why they are funding groups like these like Black liberationist groups. We know that there is evidence of funding on the right as well, but they do this for the purpose of trying to find the groups that are the most likely to make the biggest noise, where they're going to get the biggest bang for their buck. And the idea, Edgar, the idea is to destabilize the United States, to make us look bad, to make us weak. And so that's what's going on. They were, like I said, they were funding candidates all the way down to local district, like city hall level type situations.
Like you were women
Yeah, 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 yeah.
the most important thing that they asked the Yoruba people to do
Uh-huh.
was,
My husband's saying something.
according to the indictment, was not so much to influence races by choosing candidates, quite the opposite. It was to convince people that no candidate would ever look out for the best interest of the people involved. And so therefore their job was to suppress the vote.
Well, yeah,
And
of
not
course.
have people vote,
So,
discourage people
yeah,
from
but they did run in these elections, but the purpose of doing something like that is to disrupt democratic process. Obviously, it's to weaken our democracy, like I was talking about a minute ago. It's to give this idea, ultimately, that there is chaos and nothing is certain or clear with American liberal democracy. And the other thing is too what they were doing, and I'm not sure how much you have read, but they were also giving these people money to run campaigns against Ukraine. So essentially, so once the invasion occurred, hold these sort of like town halls with the community where they were literally given Russian talking points from this Ivanov guy and given those talking points as a way to sort of, I guess, frame their arguments about Ukraine. Another thing is that one of these guys who was being funded is the leader of this, well, was the leader of this group called the Black Hammer Party in Georgia. So that was Augustus Claudius Romaine. He goes by Ghazi Kodzo, Kodzo. I'm not exactly sure how you would say that. And someone else, Xavier Rushin. So the idea, again, they were giving, for example, the Black Hammer group, they gave them like 6,500 or just under $7,000, whatever it was, to organize protests, even though they were in Georgia, all the way in San Francisco. So they basically paid for them to fly out to San Francisco. They directed what the protest posters would look like, the things that would be said, various talking points that they might, you know, put out there while they were protesting in San Francisco. So the intent was definitely to spread wide scale type distrust in the American system. And just one final thing I'll say, and then I'll take a question about it or something, but um, that uh, you know, for example, even the local level here in St. Pete, where they were running these candidates, the idea was to try to split votes. They want to get um, more Black people, either one or two things, either engaged, but in the direction that they're going, or to disengage from the electoral process. And they feel like this type of effort will help them to perhaps get candidates in office who they might feel might be favorable or better than the alternative for the purposes of Russia. And all the way down to the district level, it seems crazy and insane. But if you look at the way electoral politics works, if you can flip one district here, you flip another one over here, these little districts, and these very small type districts, you can make a bigger change in the aggregate at the level of the state. And then perhaps even at the level of the nation when it comes to presidential politics for the electoral college and whatnot. So that's their main sort of message. They know that the United States has these cleavages around race, and so that's how they activate them, is through these types of disruptive protesting and all of that. So I hope that helps some. But if you have a very specific type question, I'm happy to answer it.
No, I think that's a great, sorry, Alan, that's a great synthesis, Dr. Nick, which is specifically why I asked you the question, because the primary purpose being spreading discord, but they will fund one side or the other of the far right or the far left to try to co-opt whoever they can, right? Hooking it through the NRA,
Right.
these people going through BLM, the first thing they want is sow discord. But the interesting thing is, once they're successful in doing that, they maybe help somebody try to get elected to a local office, and then they say, oh, but now how about you carry water on our issue here, which is a pro-peace movement thing, and that's how they get them spreading their message. And thanks very much for summarizing that so well.
Yeah, no problem. That's essentially it. And I another thing kind of related to this, like the Russians would be absolutely thrilled if somehow they could instigate, by stoking the right people, the people that they think are radical enough to actually act. Okay, if they could stoke some sort of incident that could potentially lead to large scale violence, their absolute biggest pie in the sky dream would for us to be engaged in a civil war, another sort of race based civil war. Uh, but anything that they could do all the way up to that is what they would like to do, would like to see happen. But at the very minimum, they want to see as much discord as possible, racial discord, because then that creates chaos within our own borders. It creates a situation where people are more likely to vote or to get in office, people who are more attuned to Russian uh, points of view of the world, I should say, the Russian worldview. That's what they want. So they've got all these like um, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, I don't know, things in the fire. I forget what that phrase is right now.
Uh,
Y-
irons in the fire.
yes, thank you, Alan. Irons in the fire. They got multiple irons in the fire, to see what works, what will stoke that unrest, and whatever they can get out of it is great as far as they're concerned. Now, the one final thing I will say is that they then, because what works great is they take this information, they take this discord, they take, for example, the Uhurus or the NRA or various people that have anything to say against Ukraine or in support of Russia or whatever it is. And then they propagate all of that as propaganda internally with inside Russia as well as externally through their outlets like RT and Sputnik and whatnot. So they then deploy that information internationally to make America look bad. Like, see, look, they've got all these race problems here, and again, the idea to discredit American democracy.
And we can say, Tucker Carlson, we're talking about you. So from Dr. Nick, I want to go to M. M, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Alan. To Jamie, dry your tears. Change your attitude towards it. Turn all the anger, all the frustration, all the sadness to positive action. You nailed it, right to your elected politicians, preferably sending them handwritten notes and placing phone calls to their offices instead of sending emails or using bots to generate messages, which could be discarded or disregarded. Adding a personal touch always makes it better for them to realize the support of their constituents uh, for Ukraine. So, all in all, lighten up and cheer up. Things will get better. And, the sun always rises.
M, thank you very much. the sun always rises. This is a good thing for everyone here and all around the world to remember.
Thanks, Em.
Thank you, Jamie. And well said, Em. Adam, and then Curry.
Yeah, I was going to say to Dr. Nick, just that I've seen before the war in